you ever think about what your brand should be, should look like, and feel like in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years? Well, most businesses, most business owners, most brands, smaller brands don't really think about that. But it is very fundamental to look at the future all the time when it comes to your brand management. Because brand management is about the development of the perception of your target audience in terms of your brand. It's not just about your products, it's not just about your services, it's not even about your customer service or brand identity, visuals, your website, things like that. No, this is about an overall vision. For instance, if you think of your brand as a person, right? What kind of a person would this brand be in 2 years' time? People don't even think about that in their regular lives, right? So no one sits down. Well, I wouldn't say no one, but most people don't sit down periodically and assess, like what's going on in their lives. Where are they? Where have they come from? And where are they heading? Most people don't do that because it is a very difficult exercise, right? You need to look at your flaws, your attributes. You need to be able to face the possibility that a lot of the things you're doing may not be the right things or the right way to do things. The same goes with brands. Your marketing might be inconsistent, let's say, with your brand story. Your brand story may be inconsistent with your brand values. And your products and services may not be aligning at all with your brand story. I mean, there's a lot of variables. And without evaluating, without sort of taking a look periodically, doing a brand audit, and also without thinking about the future, it's going to be tough for your brand to actually go to the blue ocean, right? To break through, to leave your competition behind. In fact, to stop looking at your competition without this kind of a forward thinking, a vision, it's going to be difficult. So how do you do it? How do you think about the future, not from a perspective of sales and revenue, but in terms of your brand? How do you do that? First of all, you need to look at the story, right? Now, I keep talking about this in all my videos, but it is truly fundamental, right? Your brand story, not your origin story. Your origin story is how your brand came about, what you did, how you came up with that idea of a product or a service and all that. No, that is an origin story. And yes, it has a place in your brand development, in your brand marketing. But I'm talking about a brand story, a story that communicates who your brand is, what you're all about to your target audience and aligns with their worldview, right? So that is the brand story. Of course, it's more complex than that, but that's just the definition, so to speak, of the brand story. Now, you need to make sure that your brand story is going to make sense in 2 years' time. What does making sense mean, right? How would it make sense in 2 years' time if you don't know what the future is going to be? Now, how do you figure that out? You figure that out in terms of your brand archetype and also your customer archetype, right? Your buyer personas. You need to keep a very close eye on what's happening with your customers. Now, how is the pandemic affecting your customers? How are global events affecting your customers, right? What about innovation within your market segment? What about new companies coming in, new products, new services, and alternate products, right? Alternate services. Now, let's say you have a widget and, that widget solves a particular problem for your customer. What if the problem actually disappears? So the customer doesn't need a widget to solve the problem. That means your widget, that means your brand, your product may become irrelevant. So these are the things you need to look at. You need to start from your customer archetype, your customer buyer persona, what's happening. Now, I've done a series of videos on archetypes, and I suggest you actually watch that series. I talk about all the 12 different types of archetypes, what their attributes are, and how to identify your audience and how to match them with the kind of archetypes. And that will come in really handy because your customer audience may be changing archetype. They may be a particular archetype today, but they may be changing because of global event, because of changes in their lives, changes in innovation. Once you keep an eye on that, you can then sort of look at your brand story and say, does my brand story make sense? Look, your origin story is not going to change, right? It should not change, but your brand story can change and should change depending on what's happening with your target audience, because the aim is to always align with your target audience worldview. Aligning with them is what the brand story is all about. Okay, so today, sit down, think through, take a look at your brand. Even if it's a one-person brand, even if you just have a few clients, even if you're starting out, sit down, think through, identify the archetype. Okay, identify what's going on with your target audience, your customer segment, buyer personas. It's not always about your service or your product. It's not about your competition. It is about your buyers, their worldviews, their mindsets, their psychology. The psychology of your customers is the single most important thing that determines the success of your brand, the revenue, the profits, everything. All right. Till my next video, take care.